Hey there viewers, let's discuss about the 50-year-old ghost of Apollo 13 warning us not to rush to the moon. But before this, if you have not subscribed our channel, wink wink, do subscribe it. With the future of the next moon landing beginning to look more and more uncertain as the COVID-19 epidemic pushes development back, the questions hanging in the space is whether that is still too soon. Apollo 13 will forever be known as a lunar mission that almost didn't survive. Today, on the 50th anniversary of its safe return, some are unsure about whether Artemis, NASA's moon mission eyed to start launching in 2024, is trying to take off too fast. The infamous ride wasn't the first glitch experienced by Apollo-era spacecraft headed to the moon. Even on Apollo 19, Neil Armstrong just barely decided where to touch down before the lunar lander ran out of fuel. The Saturn V rocket that launched Apollo 12 was struck by lightning, which screwed with the electronics through the spacecraft, still made it out of the atmosphere somehow. Unlike its predecessors, Apollo 13 didn't make it to the moon. The explosion that blew off a chunk of spacecraft is now bringing up serious question about whether safety measures have advanced enough since the Apollo era, and if we really are ready to return to the lunar turf. Spacecraft, you're operating in a pretty difficult environment. Gene Kranz, the flight director in charge of mission control for Apollo 13, told the New York Times, "For the first minute I thought there's a minor electronic problem. Then another controller said the crew reported a pretty big bang." What had gone unnoticed were the damaged wires inside one of the oxygen tanks of the service module, which propels the spacecraft and provides it with electric power. Astronaut John Elsvinger was piloting the command module. Mission controller asked him to take a minute to whisk around the freezing hydrogen and oxygen in the propellant tanks, a routine cryosur that prevents the propellants from evaporating, which would mess with the procedure reading. He knew something was off when the spacecraft started to shake and warning lights blazed. You probably remember that scene from Apollo 13 when Tom Hanks' Captain James A. Lovell, contact mission controller, famously saying, "Houston, we have a problem." Once Figure flipped the switch to fuzz the procedure, a spark flew. The spark set the insulation of the faulty fires on fire, and soon the tank burst. The other oxygen tank was severely damaged. The command module was in its last breath, so the astronauts crowded into the lunar module back on Earth. Engineers were able to do enough damage control to restart the command module with the drags of power that were left, and also change the trajectory of the spacecraft towards our planet, which was 200,000 miles away. Apollo 13's crew would end up splashing down in the Pacific Ocean. Had this happened when the astronaut had already landed on the moon, Swigert would have been lost in lunar orbit on the separated command module, with crewmates Lovell and Fred Hayes left stranded on the surface. Of course, that doesn't mean that Artemis will end up as ticking time bomb. Rockets have gotten major upgrades since the 60s and 70s. Lightning probably won't strike twice now that there are stricter launching rules and tech more competent at finishing out if too much electric charge is in the atmosphere. The problem is that NASA hasn't yet figured out all the details of how the upcoming moon landing should be. What they do know is that they have got the SLS, which is really a leveled up version of Saturn V that launched the Apollo missions, and the command module, which is the Orion crew capsule. It can operate autonomously, but can be switched over the manual mode. There's still one critical thing missing. NASA has not yet chosen the lander. They're currently accepting proposals from commercial entities, thinking Boeing and Blue Origin. But you can't come up with a landing plan and catastrophe-proof it in just days. NASA's administrator, Jim Britson, recently decided to change the original launch plan because it had too many phases, which could only mean more opportunities for things to go wrong. The involvement of the lunar orbital platform getaway was going to complicate things. NASA's Associative Administrator for Humans Exploration and Operation, Douglas L., is simplifying those plans to factor out a lunar getaway. So could Artemis is not be ready to take out a giant leap by 2024? It depends. At least in the worst case scenario, there are much fast communication systems than there were in 1970, and a small camera deep in the spacecraft that alerts astronaut and mission control of any damage and the extent of that damage. Unfortunately, fast-thinking computer brains bringing on new problems, a spacecraft that can do anything is still prone to computer errors. If the dreaded blue screen happened on Earth, it can happen in space. For anyone hoping to stream the same experience their parents and grandparents had on July 20, 1969, when the steady voice of Neil Armstrong was transmitted on black and white TV screens across the Earth, it might be a while. Hey, do you learn something new? Then give this video a thumbs up. And if you know about interesting facts about Apollo 13, then share it with us in the comment section below.